The battle in Chapter 3 opens with tension as Elizabeth Bathory holds the nail deliberately removed by Tomo Gozen. The audience is shocked by the act, while Elizabeth reveals her menacing signature weapon. Her movements display a clear intent to torment her opponent in the arena, turning the fight into a stage of suffering. Tomo remains alert, ready to face an enemy who turns pain into both a weapon and entertainment. Elizabeth Bathory begins to reveal her true nature as the Blood Witch. With a satisfied smile, she displays the torture device ready for use. Her steps are calm yet threatening, signaling the start of true torment. Before the audience, she treats the arena as her own personal torture chamber, turning the battle into a sadistic game rather than a mere duel. Elizabeth Bathory steps forward with confidence, revealing that her magical vestments go beyond the weapon in her hand. On the ground lies part of her torture equipment, a grim extension of her arsenal. With swift movement and a look of delight, she swings her massive spiked weapon, as if pondering which part of her opponent she should break next. The battle intensifies as Elizabeth Bathory launches a swift attack, forcing Tomo Gozen to block with her weapon. With a sly grin, Elizabeth reveals her favorite weapon, a deadly metal claw she calls Cat Claws, and immediately strikes from above with full force. Elizabeth Bathory once again surprises her opponent by unveiling a deadly new weapon, the Katoza 9 Tails, a bladed whip with 9 razor-sharp tips spinning menacingly. Tomo Gozen braces herself for the next assault, fully aware that her opponent's arsenal grows ever more dangerous. Elizabeth Bathory unleashed a vicious attack with her deadly barbed whip, but Tomo Gozen remained composed. With swift and precise movements, Tomo spun her weapon to block and sever each strand of the whip, demonstrating the skill and strength that kept her unfazed against such a terrifying weapon. Elizabeth Bathory closed the distance to Tomo Gozen and revealed her new weapon, a spiked fork known as the Thlia's Fork. With swift movements, she positioned the weapon dangerously close to Tomo's body, aiming to overpower her opponent with a deadly close-range strike. Elizabeth Bathory successfully drove the Thlia's Fork into Tomo Gozen's body, causing blood to splatter across the arena. With a satisfied smile, Elizabeth withdrew her weapon and stepped back, leaving Tomo standing with a determined gaze. The spectators looked shocked and horrified at the deadly strike. Tomo Gozen, despite being struck by Elizabeth Bathory's torture weapon, managed to endure the pain while panting heavily. Her body leaned back slightly to evade a full stab, showcasing her reflexes and physical strength. The spectators were stunned by her resilience, while Elizabeth realized her opponent wouldn't go down easily. Elizabeth Bathory relentlessly pressured Tomo Gozen with a barrage of attacks from her torture weapons. Each strike and slash weakened Tomo further, leaving her struggling to counter. Elizabeth reveled in the moment, confident in her superiority, while the spectators realized that breaking her opponent's body and spirit was her true specialty. Elizabeth Bathory found the fight disappointing, rating Tomo Gozen only 4 out of 10, far from her expectations of a spectacular duel against great figures of history. Considering her opponent unworthy, Elizabeth decided to end the battle quickly, preparing to deliver the final blow to Tomo. Tomo Gozen, shocking the audience. Yet, Tomo stood firm, recalling her upbringing as the daughter of a samurai family. If you lose your head, curse your enemy; if you lose your arms, kick them; and if you lose your legs, bite them to death. Tomo Gozen, despite being splattered with blood, stood tall and declared that her wound was merely a scratch. Elizabeth Bathory gazed at her with admiration, captivated by her opponent's determined expression amidst the fierce battle. Despite being in a dire situation, Tomo Gozen maintained her fighting spirit without faltering. With sharp eyes and burning determination, she began preparing a confident counterattack, drawing Elizabeth Bathory's intrigued gaze. Elizabeth Bathory judged Tomo Gozen's overly spread stance as a sign of weakness, convinced she could predict her opponent's moves. Brimming with confidence, she advanced to unleash relentless strikes, this time aiming for Tomo's face with the intent to mar it. Elizabeth dashed forward with her weapon, aiming to pierce Tomo Gozen's defenses. Yet Tomo stayed focused, her sharp gaze tracking her opponent's movements while readying a counterattack. The scene then shifts to a flashback in the Heian era, recounting how Tomo became a warrior in a time when women had no authority. Tomo Gozen questioning whether her role as the daughter of the noble Nakahara family or as the mistress of the head of the Kizo branch of the Minamoto clan was the reason she became a warrior. Yet the answer is simple: it wasn't lineage or connections, but something far more fundamental, revealed amid her fierce battle with Elizabeth. With her Herculean strength, Tomo Gozen could defeat anyone who stood in her way. With a single decisive strike, she shattered Elizabeth's weapon, leaving her opponent shocked and unprepared for such an overwhelming display of power. With a swift and lethal strike, Tomo Gozen pierced through Elizabeth Bathory's defenses, causing blood to gush from her body. Shock and pain were etched on Elizabeth's face, while the audience looked on in astonishment at the brutal moment. With a single powerful slash, Tomo Gozen shattered Elizabeth's magical vestments, nearly slicing her torso in half. The strike instantly turned the tide of battle, leaving Elizabeth staggering and shocked at her opponent's strength, which seemed equal to that of 1,000 warriors. Tomo Gozen advanced with fierce determination, framing her assault as retribution for Elizabeth's sins. She vowed to crush both her opponent's pain and crimes together. Meanwhile, the panting Elizabeth began to question the reality. Was she the one truly being broken this time? Elizabeth staggered, panting heavily, unable to believe that she, the one who usually dealt destruction, was now the one cornered. Memories of the torture she had inflicted flashed through her mind, making this reversal utterly unforgivable. Her hatred boiled over, unable to accept the role suddenly turning against her. A massive explosion erupted in the arena, engulfing Elizabeth in swirling thick smoke. The spectators gasped in shock and confusion, while Tomo Gozen prepared to charge, unwilling to miss the chance to strike amid the chaos. Elizabeth slowly rises from her grievous wound, emitting a black haze that engulfs her form. Tomo Gozen stands alert, sensing something ominous, yet declares she will not lose. Amid the heavy atmosphere, Elizabeth admits the pain isn't enough. She desires more. Her thirst for suffering, blood, and domination only intensifies. Elizabeth smiles with a bloodthirsty gaze, expressing her desire to feel more people being torn apart. The scene then shifts to Transylvania, at the Bathory residence in Sobolj province. Inside the grand estate, the opulent atmosphere is interrupted by the arrival of a visitor knocking at the door, greeted by a surprised maid who calls out to someone inside while pointing toward the entrance. Young Elizabeth Bathory, only 11 years old, proudly shows a beautiful sword she secretly took from her father's room to the maid named Marsh, knowing she'd be scolded if caught. Marsh looks worried, as Elizabeth often puts her in difficult situations, but the girl only smiles mischievously. The narration reveals that as a child, Elizabeth was beautiful, lovable, and genuine, though she already displayed a teasing admiration for the beauty of women like Marsh. The only issue with young Elizabeth was her careless handling of dangerous objects. Though the dagger she took was ornamental, it was still sharp. Following the household head's belief that weapons must be used practically, Marsh obeyed her mistress's wish and brought her face close to admire the dagger's beauty. But when a servant's attendant knocked on the door to fetch her, Elizabeth, startled, turned around abruptly while still holding the dagger. Accidentally, the dagger Elizabeth held pierced directly into Marsh's neck as she turned. Marsh's eyes reflected shock and pain, while Elizabeth appeared unaware of what had just occurred. Moments later, servants burst into the room and screamed in horror upon seeing Marsh collapse, while Elizabeth stood frozen in confusion and disbelief. Elizabeth was shocked and panicked, desperately trying to explain that she didn't do it on purpose. The maid screamed for help, calling for a doctor to save Marsh, who lay bleeding heavily on the floor. Chaos erupted in the room, until one servant firmly ordered Elizabeth to return to her room, while her eyes remained fixed in horror on her hand stained with blood. Elizabeth stood frozen in her room, haunted by the image of Marsh gravely injured by her own hand. The vision of Marsh's beautiful face and the endless flow of blood consumed her thoughts. From the depths of her emotions, a new and unfamiliar feeling began to emerge, slowly taking over her. Elizabeth felt a dark urge surging within her, the thrill of breaking apart beautiful people. Her face twisted in madness as she realized her true desire, to defile and ruin that beauty, savoring their destruction completely. A black haze began enveloping the arena with growing intensity, forcing everyone to react. Tomo Gozen looked startled by the sudden shift, while the audience panicked, sensing something dreadful was about to happen. Amid the chaos, Lady Agrat recognized that something significant was approaching. She revealed the greatest secret of witches, that throughout history, an intense desire can transform into pure power capable of rewriting the laws of the world. This power is known as magic, born from the deepest cravings and fueled by burning emotions. Elizabeth summoned her blood magic, creating a terrifying arena known as the Red Playroom. From above, countless torture devices rained down, surrounding Tomo Gozen, who prepared to face the assault. The air was filled with sharp and cruel weapons, turning the battlefield into a death chamber with no escape. Tomo Gozen was stunned by the sight before her. Hundreds of torture devices floated in the air, creating an oppressive and terrifying atmosphere. Elizabeth greeted her with a sly smile, declaring that this was her torture room, a place entirely under her control. The battle had now transformed into a fight within a nightmarish arena, where every corner held lethal danger. Elizabeth opened the massive gates to the Red Playroom, a terrifying space filled with floating weapons and torture devices, exuding a deadly aura of fear. Tomo Gozen watched warily, trying to grasp the meaning behind the room's name. With a confident motion, Elizabeth summoned one of her weapons, signaling the start of her cruel game. Elizabeth began her twisted game. Holding a bizarre weapon with enthusiasm, she hurled it toward Tomo Gozen. With fierce determination, she made it clear that this was no mere game, it was the embodiment of her darkest desires. Elizabeth launched her cruel toy, dropping a massive weapon toward Tomo. Though Tomo swiftly dodged it, Elizabeth laughed gleefully. She acknowledged Tomo's agility, but was already preparing her next move. Trap after trap began targeting Tomo in rapid succession. The floating torture devices rained down relentlessly across the arena. Forced to defend herself from the unending onslaught, Tomo fought to keep up as the spectators watched in confusion and alarm. Elizabeth reveals that her magic, Red Playroom, links the Iron Maiden to her torture chamber. Through this magic, she commands all the floating torture tools to move according to her will. Once again, a barrage of deadly weapons rains down on Tomo, forcing her to remain on the defensive amidst the relentless assault. One of the flying torture devices ensnares Tomo's weapon with a spiked chain. Elizabeth forcefully pulls the chain, throwing Tomo off balance and hurling her into the air, as the pressure of the battle intensifies with each passing moment. Tomo is yanked into the air by a spiked belt launched by Elizabeth, then violently slammed to the ground in front of a shocked audience. She smiles with satisfaction, admiring the result of her control over the torture devices. Tomo is now bound between two wooden pillars, her body hanging helplessly after being overpowered. Elizabeth, with a delighted and cruel smile, gleefully announces that it's time for torture.